Hello and welcome. This is Barrett from the C4 Cyber Club here at Cypress College. In this video today, we are going to cover the Ethical Hacking version 2 lab series. This is vulnerability scanning with OpenVAS. So, what is OpenVAS? It stands for the Open Vulnerability Assessment System. This is a open source framework of several services and tools offering vulnerability scanning and management. It's developed by Greenbone Networks and uses the Nessus Attack Scripting Language, or NASL, for its plugins. And actually, if you look into the history of OpenVAS, you'll find that it actually originally began as a fork of Nessus, which is another widely popular vulnerability scanner. We'll also come across NVTs, or network vulnerability tests. So these are daily. This is a daily updated feed, and it currently holds over 50,000 different NVTs. So let's go ahead and jump right into the lab. I'm already logged into the Kali machine here. A reminder, if you're following along at home, you could find the login information for that under the lab settings page. So first thing we need to do is start up the OpenVAS services. And we can do that. We can come to the menu bar up here, go to Vulnerability Analysis and OpenVAS Start. And essentially, this is just launching a command line, running a specific command. And you can see that this is launching a web UI, and that is the Greenbone Security Assistant. So this is what we're going to be working in. It's a web interface, and we'll use our own local loopback at the port 9392. So give it a minute or two and it will launch automatically. Okay, great. So now that has launched. And as you can see in the lab, we have our username and password here. Obviously not recommended for real world use, but it's admin and then password. So when we log in, we find ourselves at the dashboard. We don't have any tasks currently going, so that makes sense. These are zeroed out. But if we look down here at the bottom, we have a couple things worth noting. So here's the NVTs that we were talking about at the beginning, or those network vulnerability tests. And it's broken up by severity class. So we have 59,000 NVTs, and this is something that gets updated, right? We currently have over 25,000, nearly 26,000 high vulnerabilities, 27,000 in the medium range, and a bit lower, 2,600 in the low range. And then there's roughly 4,000 that are just related to log analysis. And also on the left-hand side here, this is kind of interesting. It's CVEs by creation time. So what is a CVE? Well, this is short for Common Vulnerability and Exposures. These are lists of publicly disclosed security flaws or vulnerabilities. So when somebody refers to this, a CVE, they mean a security flaw that's been assigned a specific CVE ID number. And these are broken down by years. So you could see here, there's a huge jump in CVEs in the year 2017. And then still in 2018, 2019, and you could imagine in 2020, there's also been quite a lot. And even as of this recording in 2021, in February, I want to say there's at least been maybe 30-some thousand CVEs already reported, possibly more. So CVEs are overseen by the MITRE Corporation. It's funded by CISA, or the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, a part of our DHS. And there are some other databases where you could find CVEs. NIST's vulnerability database would be one. And also exploit-db.com is another very popular source. So with that said, let's go ahead and hop into the lab. Let's explore OpenVAS a little bit more. So the next part has us go to extras menu here and check out the CVS Calculator. So CVSS, this stands for Common Vulnerability Scoring System, and this becomes very important if you are pursuing a CISA Plus certification exam pass. It's definitely covered in good detail there. And just in general, it's very important to know this information and be comfortable with the various metrics in the security field. So if I hit calculate here on just what's set by default, you'll notice that the vector populates down here and we have a base score of 0, right? So it's basically no criticality. There's no issues whatsoever. But if we start to change some of these things like access vector, let's say, okay, this can be, this vulnerability exists through the network. So it's possible for network access. Access complexity, let's change this to medium, meaning that, okay, this vulnerability is not super easy to do, but with a little bit of effort and maybe some Googling, a person could potentially figure out how to exploit this vulnerability. Authentication, maybe it doesn't require any authentication at all, which is definitely a big concern. And now you notice that it has the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's part of the CIA triad that we often talk about in security. So let's say these are all set to partial. So there are some risks in all 3 areas. And you notice that the base score gets automatically updated down here. We are now at a medium level vulnerability. So from 4 to 6, that's going to be your medium vulnerability score. And you notice that the base vector also changed. So the AV here relates to the access vector. N is for network. If I change this to adjacent, for example, you would notice that it changes here. Access complexity, medium. So we have the M there. Let's change this to low. Maybe it becomes extremely easy, for like a script kiddie to exploit. And then you notice the base score jumps, and now we're in a high criticality, right? Because it's the access complexity is very easy. Authentication, N for none. And the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability are all set to partial here. So you can see how this vector gets set up. This is very common. You'll find this on most vulnerability scan results. So if you are in a position where you need to analyze that, understanding the metrics and how they relate to the base vector is very important. And this calculator is a great resource. So if you're ever in a position where you need to get some more hands-on experience, fire up OpenVAS and check out the calculator. All right, so let's move on. And I probably should have got started with this sooner just because a scan takes a minute, much more than a minute, probably 10 to 20 minutes. But let's get a scan going. So if we go to scans and tasks, you'll notice we have this pop up here. It's going to tell us to click on the scan wizard. So we'll click on that purple icon, task wizard, and let's go ahead and scan. We're going to be scanning the OWASP BWA machine. So this is at 192.168.68.12. And of course, you could find that in the lab as well. So this is just a very quick, easy scan to do, default settings, and we'll start the scan here. So you notice a scan has been requested. Now the way that this web UI works is that it's going to refresh every 30 seconds. I could force a refresh as well. And then you're going to notice that the status changes. So every 30 seconds, this will refresh. You could potentially change that. And then you'll notice that the status will continue to go up. Now, as that continues to scan, we'll go ahead and go through other menu options here, so that we don't just sit here and wait for the scan. Something I do want to note, because this did happen to me once, if you notice an error, an authentication error at all during this lab, you could either click where it says assume sane state, or just refresh, and you should be good to go. So just wanted to make a note of that because that did happen to me recently. Okay, so I'm going to skip past this part. We'll come back to that when the scan is done. And let's take a look at scan configs. So right now we just did a default scan, but if we come to configuration, scan configs, you'll notice that there's different types of configurations already set up. I think the one that we're doing by default is this full and fast. And you notice a lot of these are kind of set up the same, but you notice here in these columns that you have the families column, you have the NVTs. So these scans are actually set up to scan all of the NVTs and within all families. So if I click on this one here, full and very deep ultimate, you notice that it is scanning for all of these items. So this is something that you may want to set up your own custom configuration. Obviously you wouldn't want to look for CentOS local security checks if you're scanning a Windows machine, for example. So some pretty obvious scenarios where you would want to disable or only enable certain types of scans, because that will drastically cut down your scan time. You don't want to be scanning for something unnecessary. But it's definitely good to take a look through this, get familiar with all the different testing families, what OpenVAS looks for, right? And now we could also set up very specific targets. And in this case, what we're going to do, we're going to set up a target specifically for this OWASP BWA machine. And this lab doesn't necessarily go over it, but if you look under administration, you could also set up users, groups, roles. So if you are maybe giving permission to a specific person on your security team, and they are in charge of, maybe they're in charge of scanning this machine. So you'll give them permission to scan only that machine. So that's where setting up targets, setting up a user role that has access to that target can come into play. But in this case, let's go ahead and we'll go to configuration. We'll create a new target. And actually, sorry, we're already in that section. In most areas, to create something new, whether if it's a new target, a new role, something like that, it's going to be this blue star icon. So we'll click on that. And it's going a little weird. Let me try that again. There we go. Okay. So let's give it the name OWASP. We have to set the IP address here. So 192.168.68.12. And we're going to leave most of this stuff except for a live test. Let's change this to consider alive. This is basically saying we know that this machine is up. We don't have to do any kind of host discovery. We don't have to ping it or anything like that. So we know that it's there. So we'll consider it alive. And we'll go ahead and create that. So now you notice we have a designated target for that OWASP machine. And so now that we've created that target, we can actually create a new scan, a new task, and actually specifically select that target. So let's go to scans, tasks, and we could see the scan that we had started previously. So on my end here, it's actually almost complete. But let's go ahead and select the blue star. We're going to select new task. And we'll give it a name, OWASP. Whoops, if I could type. OWASP-scan. And you can see scan targets. It already has this one selected, but in a real world, you would probably have a lot of different scan targets. So in this case, we want to select the OWASP. We're not doing this in this lab, but alerts is a really cool feature to be familiar with and know that it's available. So if I click on this blue star, for example, we can create a very specific alert. And let's say, you know what, if it's a medium level vulnerability or higher, so we'll add a severity of at least 4. I want to know about it. And you could have that automatically send you an email alert for that. So or you may want to go a little bit higher and say, if it's a high level severity with 7, then definitely send me that email alert. But I'm going to go ahead and exit out of the alert area here. So we're back to here. I don't think there's anything else we want to change except for the scan config. So here you notice that you could set the various different scan configurations here. So let's go ahead and select full and very deep ultimate, and we'll go ahead and create that. So you notice that a new scan has been added here. Our other scan completed, so that's great, perfect timing. Now, we could have also set a schedule for this scan as well. But since we didn't, we would have to actually press play on here. You're welcome to do this. I'm not going to press play at this moment, but you're welcome to run this additional scan as well. Compare and contrast the two. But essentially, we have reached the end of the lab. But I do want to take it a step further and actually look at the results of this lab. So if we click on immediate scan of IP, oh, no, I'm sorry. Let me go back. And actually the best place to click is here on the reports. And then from here, you'll see our scan results. We found 21 high severity vulnerabilities, 72 medium, 9 low, and 108 log. So obviously this machine that we're scanning, the OWASP BWA, the BWA stands for Broken Web Application. So it's vulnerable by design. So obviously, yeah, it makes sense. We found quite a lot. And if we click on the date here, this is where we get a much more detailed report. Okay, so now we see the super high level 10 vulnerabilities at the very top. We have a lot of end of life, especially with the TikiWiki content management system. We see denial of service vulnerabilities with the current Apache web server version running. Just all kinds of things. Cross-site request forgery vulnerabilities with a web calendar. So yeah, I encourage you to look through this, get a feel for all these various vulnerabilities. You can even click within here, and that's going to give you even more details about the vulnerabilities and potential solutions as well, right? It's going to give you the CVE number that we talked about earlier. Links, you can click this link and visit the website, and also some public information. So here's maybe like a post from Packet Storm Security. Here's the listing in exploit-db.com that we talked about earlier as well. So just tons of information within here. So definitely go through it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. This was a pretty straightforward lab. Once again, we covered vulnerability scanning with OpenVAS. We talked about CVEs, NVTs, and all of that fun stuff. So thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.